This is the Education Business Podcast for consultants and business owners providing services in schools. I'm Claire Riley, and I'll be sharing how to start, grow and scale your education business. Ed, welcome to the Education Business Podcast.
I'm pleased to be here.
So yes. I did wonder when I said that if that would confuse people, because obviously Ed Riley is here, but also Ed Tranham is also here. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation because hopefully we're not going to confuse you. But I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. It is our mission, really, when we're interviewing people, to make sure that we're interviewing people that we can really learn from. So we know that we can learn a ton from you. So I imagine that a lot of people listening to this podcast right now might not have heard of you or have any idea what you're doing. So do you want to tell us what you do and your background, really, how you got into doing what you're doing now?
Okay, well, I've been I began life as an accountant, as a public sector accountant at Cambridgeshire County Council, and I essentially became the education accountant at the county, or one of the education accountants. And Cambridgeshire, or this is back in the 80s, was one of the pilots for local financial management before budgets were devolved to schools. And I think on the basis of that, I when the Education Reform Act came out, which is about 88, I joined Capita and as the education consultant to develop their education practice. And I guess within sort of 2 years, decided actually it'd be better to do my own thing. And with three former colleagues at Cambridgeshire, or ex-colleagues at Cambridgeshire, we created a business called Cambridge Education Associates that essentially went out and worked with local authorities and schools to talk about devolved budgets, building all the formulas that distributed the money, and then within a few years, we got into the early stage of Ofsted inspections, and that was the business. And the Cambridge Education Associates ultimately was sold to very confusing Cambridge Education Consultants,
right,
which is part of Mott MacDonald. And in meanwhile, I started another business called Optimus Education, which was a publishing business, and this is the link really between what we're doing now in terms of the assignment report, which is effectively a newsletter, because Optimus was a newsletter business that we launched for schools again 97. So you got New Labour, and the premise of the business was very much lots of information now, lots of money being spent at long last in schools in particular, lots of information going to schools, and our sort of thinking was the information getting below down to the actual people that needed it, i.e. if you were a CPD coordinator or a curriculum manager. So we essentially built all these communities, and this is many ways before you would do everything as the Key does, for example, online. We did everything as flat, essentially paper printed newsletters, and we created we essentially identified worry badges within the school. So if your job was CPD coordinator, Senko, or whatever, you wore a badge, and you wanted information to help you do your job more effectively. So we had these subscription newsletters, and on the back of that, we then created conferences for those individual individual groups, and then ultimately sold the business to a company that was listed on AIM called Electric Word. And we sort of stayed there, and we grew the business to about £5 million in the end. And I left, must have been 2008, to essentially set up this latest venture, which is the assignment report, which had already been set up, but it came across my desk at Electric Word as a potential acquisition opportunity, which I was sort of engaged at UW looking at acquisition opportunities, but it was too small. But I was about to leave the company, so I thought I'll take it on myself. So that's why I've now got the assignment report, which has now been chuntering on for about almost 15 years now. And for those who don't know the assignment report, it's a business intelligence newsletter, monthly newsletter, with a lot more digital content than people actually use at the moment, but which say goes out monthly and provides good in-depth analysis of transactions, M&A transactions, fundraising, financial results, particularly in the UK industry. But what I've done over time is to extend it to other, I guess, other more international markets, in particularly the US education market, partly to reflect the fact that we've got subscribers in the US, but also because there's, I think, increasingly now what happens here or what happens in the US sort of migrates over to the UK. And over time, we've built up I suppose, 90% of our subscriber base are what I would call trade. So we're not really a report for private equity, although 10% of our subscribers are sort of private equity and investors. And then about 90% of our subscribers are in the UK, and we've sort of developed a big community of subscribers. And as you know, we run events for networking within the industry. And that's chuntering along, and under the surface, we do more granular research for clients, most of whom are our subscribers. And then in addition to that, I've got another interest in a business that is in the whole area of artificial intelligence, but more a software tool to enable people to build very sophisticated models for financial services and insurance companies. But that's completely different.
Oh, did you see Ed Riley's eyes light up when you said AI then?
Yeah, well, don't get me started on ChatGTP. So that's the, I don't know if you've seen that one recently, but that's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, I think there's always, I think the problem about AI is just thrown around. I don't want to sort of throw around, but there's a lot of people claiming AI, but there isn't really artificial intelligence. It's more a sort of brick in a computer argument.
So what I want to thank you for that. Obviously we've been to a couple of the events, and that's been really useful.
Yeah.
I think I suppose in some ways it does depend on the size of your company or what you're wanting to do next, but in terms of networking, really, really useful. So say you're a smaller business and you're listening now, what would you say the benefits are of maybe starting to read the assignment report?
Well, I think, a sign report or whatever. I think one of the key, and I like sort of come across this. Indeed, some of the work we do is, I think that if you're, it doesn't matter really what size of business you are, you need to be aware very much about the sort of competitive landscape that you're operating in. I think many, and all, even to the extent of actually knowing what silo, because I think one of the issues particularly in the schools, UK schools market, is that there are lots of different silos and different, you have even in your area, you've got, you can argue you've got the traditional textbook providers, and then you've got the next silo, which I would describe as the sort of supplementary, essentially, the supplementary publishers that sort of in part have grown up because there's some technology advantage that they move quicker, or alternatively they've got they're seeing gaps and opportunities because the larger boys or larger companies rather are not filling those gaps. So I think understanding that landscape is very important. I think it's important, and this is obviously what the assignment report provides, is how your competitors are doing, how they're assessing where you are. Because I think we sort of tend to, some of the work we do, for example, we tend to look at the market in sort of define the market in four types of characters. There are those companies, a small number, which we would describe as challenged, that have gone over I won't mention names, but there are companies that are long in the tooth that have probably should have sold some time ago. There are then what we would describe as sort of champions. These are the businesses that may have, and I think our definition of a champion in any particular silo within the sector would be a company that's probably got at least a third market share in terms of, if you're looking at, say, the secondary markets, and it's about, there's about 1,500 schools in England. If you've got 1,500, you're doing very well in this market. I would say. You've then got the challengers who think who see an opportunity, who are challenging those champions. So we're not quite there yet, and that's where we're seeing a lot of sort of investment, lots of movement. And then you've got chasers, who are the early stage companies who are set up. So I think understanding where you sort of fit in that sort of landscape, and together with understanding the trends, in particular, the particular funding trends, because one of the big issues in and it's the UK, and I'd say arguably lots of sort of Western European and markets is so much is government funded. When it comes to the school sector, you don't, if you go to Korea or you go to parts of Asia, there's the private spend on education is so much greater as a proportion of household spend, whereas here in the UK we're very much dependent, particularly in the school sector, of the state funding education. So I think as a person in the market, you've got to be aware of what's happening with those funding, and of course, as you know, every year there's some budget pressure, or some exactly.
Yeah, there are definitely constraints, aren't there?
Well, and I think absolutely, and I think that's I think that's one of the big issues of understanding. Tutoring is a good example, really, of a big chunk of money that was made available for the catch up post COVID, and of course, a lot of people try to get into that market, and for a number of reasons, it just hasn't. Two and a bit years ago, everyone was rather excited, and some of the tutoring companies getting excited about their own valuation. But I think what you've now seen is that's what government has, what the DFE has done with that chunk of funding, and putting it more direct to schools rather than slightly, rather than how people thought it was going to be used. So there's a lot of companies that have struggled, have been struggling in the last 12 months with the shift in the way tutoring is funded. So I think all those things are very important. I think the other aspect is identifying opportunities. So it's not necessarily, if you're looking at the assignment report, we often look at looking at our analysis companies about where they're growing, and I think it's as a small, particularly as a small company, it's often trying to find a new opportunity for your product. And I think one of the areas which has grown quite significantly, particularly in the last 5, even before COVID, has been the whole international schools market. A lot of people have tended not to focus on that market, but I think we're seeing in the last 5 years in particular that the trend in trying to grow the presence in the international market, because there's a lot of English UK curriculum schools out there for people to grow their business.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what you're saying about funding, and I think that's definitely one of the reasons why more companies like Classroom Secrets have made it possible for teachers to buy, because if the funding's not there from the school, you're kind of constrained, and that does help a little bit, even though it's obviously not ideal. But it kind of takes the decision away in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I always find it strange here that if you're in the US, I can't remember how much it is, but if you're a teacher, you can offset, maybe it's $100-$200 against your tax return, against your taxes for buying curriculum resources.
Yeah, it would be great. We'd kind of, we'd get you on board, an accountant, saying, right, okay, this is the process, this is how you do it. It would be brilliant.
But I think you and obviously Twinkle have seen an opportunity there, and obviously in the early days, exactly this is what tests were doing as well, in terms of their sort of free resources. So it's and teachers will spend we'll spend some money on their own resources.
Yeah, and generally to save the time more than anything, to get the life back.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So you've mentioned obviously that you have another interest in the AI market, and this question is not one that we agreed, but I'm going to go anyway. How hard do you think it is in the education market? Because obviously you're an accountant first, so you've been in education, but you don't have a teaching background, but you've stayed in it. So I think, there's a reason why you've stayed in it.
Good. Well, I think it's as a good question. I think for me, the reason why the assignment report and I'm very much involved in many ways is really, I guess, many ways reflects everything that's gone before. So over the last 30 plus years or so, probably longer, I built up a network, and in many ways the assignment report is reflects that network in many respects. And it's not that it's the event, I thought it was quite interesting. The event that we held recently in November, I was speaking to one of the CEO from the trust that took part, and I think it's no doubt that I think it was quite interesting that people in schools obviously see all these companies, these for-profit companies, that the only thing that's driving these companies is they want to make money. And in speaking afterwards with the chief executive of the trust, it was interesting that he sort of realised that everyone is linked. So schools want to improve the outcomes of their students, and so do companies, because you can only make money if you actually have a product or a service that supports the school in achieving its ambitions. And I think that's that's a big thing. So I think there's probably a lot more to be done, actually, and arguably perhaps even for the authority board to get that message across to schools that everybody isn't just after their money, full stop. It's actually everyone most people in the industry want to help schools and multi-academy trusts and indeed local authorities actually benefit their pupils and students.
Yeah, I think it's like any sector, really, isn't it? If you're not listening to your customers and acting on the feedback you're getting and in line with what they want, then you're putting yourself at risk, really, aren't you, as a company? I think really it's kind of across the board as well as in education, really, I would say.
Well, absolutely. You've only just got to. I think the thing about the market, of course, is particularly in education, is you've only got to. We've had some slip ups in the past by one or two companies, and your whole reputation it can be damaged. And I think the efficacy. There's a lot of emphasis on efficacy, and again, it's one of the things that came out of the recent conference, that you've only got, and this is an issue for any early stage company. You've only got a certain number of years with every student. So if you're key stage 3 and 4, you've only got 5 years, and to what extent can schools or multi-academy trusts take a risk with something completely from left field in relation to maybe some curriculum, some AI or whatever that doesn't actually work. It's getting the balancing the risks with the benefits.
And I think that feeling as well of companies are out to make money, that's not just at the top, that's all the way through, because we see it in when we employ teachers, for example. They already have a feeling of, oh no, I'm working for a company, and now we must be just out to make money. So it's very embedded.
Absolutely.
So, kind of speaking of that, obviously, lots of the listeners might be thinking about in the future, their exit plan. Maybe they've got a desire to sell their business, maybe now, maybe in the future. What have you learnt through your journey about acquisitions that could be useful for anybody looking to sell eventually?
Well, I think one of the big things is for everybody is to understand, anyone who wanted to sell their business, actually understanding what drives the
Mm.
value, because it's not just multiples of revenue or multiples of EBITDA, or however you want to define it. And I think there's we when we sort of break this down into looking at what people are looking at. One is obviously product or service, and I think that might be looking at the product in terms of the currency. I think one of the again coming back to the issue that this sometimes businesses get too long in the tooth, and you have to question question the technology, the currency of the product, etc. I think the attractiveness of the market. I think if you're one of the big things, it comes back to what's driving, what are the growth opportunities. And if you're doing well, but there's not, if you feel you're doing well, but there's not much growth in the business, then that will affect the value. Your competitive positioning. If you've got a product that makes it very difficult for, and this is without this has been the issue, for example, for Sims, where if you've got big barriers to entry, which Sims has in the past. In fact, I think ought to say that one of my either claims to fame is I did introduce Sims to Capita many years ago. Many years ago. But if so Sims were for a long time had this fantastic massive barriers to entry. But of course, along comes the cloud, and you've got but barriers to entry is a big thing, and obviously your market share. And I think if you're in that sort of position where you've got at least a third market share, if you're looking at valuations, people that have got big market shares, people like GL, for example, is a good example. Then that will enhance the your sort of valuation. Your customer base churn. I think lots of subscriber base. If you've got a subscription based business, then it's the historic churn. So putting a lot of work into maintaining a reasonable level, which certainly high 80s, 90s would be very good. And I've seen some businesses that have been bought where the owners have bought businesses and have not treated the business in the same way as the previous owners did, and the number of the renewal rates have declined quite dramatically. I think people. I think people is important, particularly if you're looking at your business and you actually don't want to be there in the business when you leave. There are lots of businesses, a lot of acquirers. Often, again, it depends on the size of business, but even if you've got, say, annual recurring revenue of at least £3 million, which might be even those kind of businesses, a buyer may want you to remain in the business. So I think it's important if you go to market to sell your business, then it's very important to actually still have a plan that where the business is going. There's no, I did speak many had a meeting with people that wanted to sell their business, and I was sort of advising them about what not to say. And the first thing they said to the potential buyer acquirer was, "Oh, we plan to leave in 6 months." So it was, and that was not the thing to say at the start of the conversation. So I think it's important. If you need a plan. You need to show a buyer. You need to show a potential acquirer that this is where the business can go. These are the growth opportunities. Otherwise, they'll be thinking, well, is it really attractive? How attractive is the obviously, and again, Sims is a good example because it's been generating a lot of cash. So it really depends on what stage of growth you are as well, which is which stage, if you're the sort of cash cow that Sims had become, then there's a different perspective from an acquirer than if you're just at an early stage. And I think I think that, efficacy, again, coming back to efficacy, I think increasingly that is on, and particularly for the more mature businesses, that you can actually show that it does make a difference. And I suppose finally, as someone who's acquired businesses as well, is that you really want to ensure that everything, your whole housekeeping, all your contracts, the whole is all clean. I did I won't embarrass them, but I did come across one company that actually had a racehorse on the balance sheet.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, so no racehorses, basically. So if you're listening and you've got a racehorse, then maybe in the next financial year, maybe don't have that racehorse.
Well, arguably, although not in this particular, but if it's a very successful thoroughbred, it might actually be worth more than the business.
Well, yeah, that's true. Quick question. So, in different industries, my understanding is that there are different ways to value a business. Is there a set way that's generally used in education?
No. Well, no. There's obviously no. There's no. Yeah, there's no rule of thumb. Yeah, it really depends, because if you just look at what's happened in the market in the last 3 years in terms of COVID. So this time 3 years ago, there's just murmurs of what's happening with COVID, and what COVID did in that first year in 22. Sorry, 20. Get me dates mixed up now. In whatever it was. Anyway, that first year, that big switch to online, and suddenly online learning and everything to do with digital became very, very popular. So what you saw in the back end, I guess, of 21 was those companies. There were some very attractive assets that came up for sale and went for some very attractive multiples. And I think one of the general things, I was having a conversation with one company yesterday, is that there is a diminished number of attractive assets, and also you've got at the same time reduced valuations. So expectations of the buyer versus the seller, there's a mismatch, I think, at the moment, that sellers have not adjusted yet to the change in valuations. But they're still so good. It's not that there's not, if you've got a good asset that ticks all the boxes, that people will pay a reasonable price. But I think the thing particularly in the school sector in the UK, there's a lot of not subprime, but subscale assets that people are trying to shift. And I think that and I've still got a sort of disconnect between something that may even just have 1 million revenue and some idea of what the valuation is. But there's no fast rule, but hard and fast rule about what multiples to go for. But you're better off in a subscription business than you are in a just a one-off sale. The more your income is generated by recurring revenue, that makes you more attractive.
Absolutely. Ed Riley.
Which Ed? Okay, so what do you think are the kind of main sort of growth opportunities in the Edtech sector in the next 3 years?
Well, it's quite interesting, really, because it's always interesting how you describe Edtech, isn't it? I think Edtech has become, it's is a sort of catch-all term, and anyone who can put Edtech thinks the valuation will go through the roof. But I think in the school sector, I think when I sort of look in, I still see lots of people operating in silos, or lots of offers that are particularly in what I would describe as the key areas from a teacher school point of view, which is the combination of assessment, content, and the whole student information system type. And I think there's you've got companies that are trying to provide some of the glue, like one for example. But I do wonder whether there is that sort of opportunity, because ultimately what I guess in many ways looking at what teachers are looking for are coming back to the whole issue of more effective use of their time and so forth, is something that can provide that, pull that information together in a sort of almost a single dashboard that maybe. So if you've got the formative assessments of GL and you're doing ongoing during the year, you've got the content, and you're just look at all this data that's now being collected, and I still wonder whether there's something that's on top of it. I throw in AI as but there's something that can show you the paths of students and what actions you need to take, that kind of thing. I think that's the bit that's missing potentially. I think people got part of the solution, but I don't think the whole of the solution isn't quite out there at present. And if you move out of the sort of K-12 space, I think the where you do move more into people, more the sort of B2C space, then I think that the whole issue of post 16 and the skills gap and how you can use technology, how you can help people find their best routes and look at their what kind of skill set you need, and then you can provide a sort of training, or which in a hybrid online come face-to-face model. I think that's I feel that's the big opportunity outside of the school sector, is how you give people the right skills for going forward. And you've got a business, for example, obviously Multiversity, which is or not Multiversity, Multiverse. Anyway, Ewan Blair's business, which has got an extraordinary $1 billion valuation. But the only key bit of tech they have, anything that's specifically special, is they run an algorithm just to try and match you wanting to do an apprenticeship with someone, with a company that's probably best fits your profile. It's not terribly sophisticated, but I think there's a lot more that can be done in that sort of area.
Yeah, I guess the hardest thing about this, from my perspective, obviously being an ex-teacher, working with lots of teachers and working with other professionals now, is getting tech people and education people to work together really well and understand each other. I think that's the hardest thing to move it forward, and it takes a lot of money as well to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the problems, and if you're looking about issues of scaling businesses, I think one of the there are a number of factors, but if you look at all the research, you essentially need in building a business in particularly that one that's very much focused on the classroom as such, is you need a techie, you need an educationalist, and to scale that business, you need a salesperson. You need those three people, and I think the problem with companies that struggle to scale is that often you don't have all those three together.
Yeah.
So you have a good techie who has an idea, but doesn't really relate back to how this is going to work in the classroom as such. And I see lots of those businesses. Likewise, you have good educationalists who have an idea. But the fundamental thing, and the reason why most of these businesses don't scale in the end, is that I think two things. One is the too much focus on product, not enough on sales, and secondly, owners or the founders don't recognise their limitations. And I think you've got to realise, what's your skill set, and often that's not, as I say, it comes back to it's not selling. So if you recognise that, yes, then there's an opportunity to scale the business. But I think that's why most businesses don't scale significantly.
Also, if you want to sell in the future, you have to remove yourself anyway.
You do, absolutely. You've got to have a sort of, so that's another, absolutely, that's another thing about the leadership of business. You've got to, you've got to show you've put a leadership team, or you've got a leadership team in place that can take the business forward if you're not if you're not involved in the business.
Do you know what? We've had such a lovely chat. Thank you so much. I'm just like we've been going for 35 minutes already. Tell us how. So, I would say at the moment, a lot of listeners, Education Business Podcast, this will be very, very new to them. Whereabouts can they find out about reading the assignment report or finding out about M&A in education?
Well, the easiest way is just to visit our website. So if they visit the assignmentreport.com, they will come to our site, and that will they can sign up for a free trial of the current edition, and then they can review that. That will give them some digital access as well. And then if they want to take it further, they can subscribe.
If they find it really interesting read. I find it really interesting reading, so thank you.
Interesting, definitely.
Okay, that's good, but it's very it's very enjoyable to put together every month.
I have to say, so we're working with some specialists in M&A. So after this call, I'll talk to you about people you might know because they were at Capita as well. But they were quite impressed that there was there was a magazine as such, or a newsletter for education. It was like, oh, that's really helpful. You don't have to go do all the research. So it's good.
Very good.
Super. Right. Thank you so much.
Okay. No, thank you, Claire. And thank you, Ed.
Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. To get more information to grow your business, sign up at educationbusinessclub.co.uk.